Welcome to Love in Life, a guide to a positive mindset. My aim is to show you that the key to a happier and more positive mind is to love the life you have. We will look at tips and tools you can use to improve your mindset, and the best thing is, we'll all be on this journey together. Hello everyone. God, it's a shame you can't see what's going on here because I have just had the most terrible trouble getting my microphone working. You don't care about that because you can't see it, like I said, but it would be funny if you could. How are you feeling? I am quite high vibe today, to be honest with you. If you saw my stories yesterday, I posted that I was on my way to the gym. The sun was shining and the full moon was still up in the sky. And I've just got back from the most amazing weekend away with my family. So we were celebrating my parents' 40th wedding anniversary this year. It was their wedding anniversary on Saturday, and what an inspiration, like 40 years of marriage. That is quite something. They are such an inspiration to all of us in our family, and yeah, it was just amazing. They'd hired a house that was big enough to fit all of us in. So my parents, my nan, my sister and her kids, Martin, Haley, and us and the boys, and all the dogs as well. My mum and dad have got a mental dog. So that was 3 dogs running around. It was just so lovely. We had like a little party on Saturday night, and it was just so lovely. And we're all just very, very grateful for the family that we've got. I know not everybody is lucky enough to have what I've got, and I am just so, so grateful. And it's put me on a really high vibration. I was driving home last night with my eldest, and I said to him, "Did you enjoy yourself this weekend?" And he said, "I loved it." And that was so nice to hear because he's 13 years old. So, you know, he's at that age where he doesn't always really want to be around people, but they were both really looking forward to this weekend. So they've absolutely loved it, playing with their cousins, just being around their family. But it was funny this morning because obviously we had a few late nights. I don't want to brag, but our family party went on till 4 a.m. It was epic. Anyway, there was a few late nights, and Alfie, bless him, was sleeping in the living room, so he had to wait for us to go to bed. So bless him, he was up till 4 o'clock. Anyway, obviously yesterday he said he had an amazing time when we were away. This morning when I got him up for school, oh my God, he was a proper Kevin. And if you don't know what Kevin is, do you remember? I think it was Harry Enfield, something like that. It was like from Kevin and Perry, if you remember that. And Kevin is just this lovely little chap, really helpful to his parents, really just lovely. And then the minute he turns 13, he wakes up in the morning and he comes down, he's like, oh, nobody likes me. Oh, I hate everybody. Oh. And that is what I've got at home. But he is starting to come through the other side of it. Sorry, Alfie, if you're listening. I know you're probably not. But yeah, it is quite funny. So yeah, this morning that was what I had. And it just made me think of something that I've been meaning to discuss on my podcast. So that is going to be my subject this week. And that is something that's called negativity bias. So what is negativity bias? So our tendency as humans is to register negative stimuli. So that's situations, experiences, dreams, images, and we remember them over positive ones. So we basically pay more attention to the negative things than the positive things that happen. It's completely natural, and I'll explain why in a minute, but it's the reason why we hold on to insults or negative feedback even when we've had positive praise or compliments. It's the reason why we don't focus on compliments. It's the reason why we recall traumatic experiences more than positive ones, and also why we give our attention more to negative things in general over positive things. The reason why I want to talk about negativity bias is because if you're on some sort of self-development journey, which I'm guessing you probably are if you're listening to this podcast, and if you're not already, then maybe you're considering it. and you're just looking for a bit of inspiration before you get going. But what I don't want is for anybody to be under the illusion that by training yourself to think positively, I don't want anyone to think that this makes negative thoughts go away altogether. And I don't think they ever truly do. And again, I'm going to talk to you about why in a few minutes. But it's completely natural to have negative thoughts, to worry about things. Like, just because you start a self-development journey doesn't mean these things automatically go away. And I've got no sort of magic potion to make this go away. I don't want people thinking that because I'm telling you how to adopt your mind to put a more positive spin on things. I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm asking you to do by assuming that negative things, negative thoughts will stop happening, because they won't. And that's not always a bad thing, and you'll find out why later. Before I carry on, I just need to warn you that Hugo's just come in the room and he's sleeping right behind me and snoring very loudly. Also, we've got lots of work going on here. We're having some work done on the house, so out on the driveway. But there's lots of noise going on, so I do apologise if you can hear that in the background. Anyway, let's carry on. So we know that negativity bias is our tendency to register negative stimuli over positive and pay more attention to the negative things. So why do we do this? Okay, so the short answer is evolution. So if we go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, the Neanderthal in us relied on our negativity bias. When we were cavemen, we needed it in order to survive. We needed to assess dangers and possible negative situations. So we were protecting ourselves from all sorts of things like saber-toothed tigers and other tribes or other cavemen. And we also needed to eat. So if we weren't assessing every situation like it was going to possibly kill us, then we probably would be dead. So when we're faced with a potentially negative or dangerous situation, our brain communicates this to the rest of our body, and this activates something that we know nowadays as the fight or flight mode. So negativity bias and fight or flight mode, these are things that happen within the space of a split second, because if it didn't happen within the space of a split second, then our caveman would be dead. So this is an essential part of our survival. It's in our makeup, it's in our DNA. If this didn't exist, then there's no way humanity would have survived. So with that in mind, think how humanity has evolved over time. Obviously, things are different now. The modern world that we live in, we don't need the same amount of negativity bias. We don't need the same kind of fight or flight. In our day-to-day lives, we still need this to a certain extent to avoid being hit by a car, for example. But we don't need it to make sure that we're not attacked by a random animal. Unless you live somewhere like Alaska, then you might have to worry about being attacked by a grizzly bear or something. But you know what I mean. We need it a lot less than our ancestors would have, because of the way that technology has developed and our lives have evolved. But because we have still got this as part of our DNA, but don't need it in the way that we used to have needed it, this can cause overreactions to stressors that aren't life-threatening, like traffic jams, work problems. We might find ourselves overreacting to menial things that in the grand scheme of survival don't really matter. And that's okay, but it's good to be aware of it, because if you notice yourself overreacting to something or unnecessarily being negative about something, it's just good to know why. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how we use negativity bias in modern day life. So when I said to you at the beginning of the episode, I said to you about Alfie, I asked him how his weekend was with the family. He absolutely loved it. You know, when we were driving home yesterday, his memory of it was bloody fantastic. He loved it. But when I woke him up this morning, because he was tired and all he could remember, all he could focus on was the fact that he was up until 4:00 on Saturday morning, Sunday morning, whatever it was. But because he had that one night of really little sleep, that's all he's focusing on now. Something else I've just remembered is when we had our last holiday, before the bloody corona ruined the world, we went to Turkey. It was our first time in Turkey and we had an amazing holiday. Like, the boys absolutely loved it. We very regularly say that that was one of our favourite holidays. But in Craig's memory, it wasn't his favourite holiday. It was one of his worst holidays because our experience at the airport that we flew from was horrendous. We got delayed. We had a number of things go wrong for us. But because he had that memory in his head, that tarnished the overall memory of his holiday. So until, earlier on this year, he never wanted to go to Turkey again. And I did have to point out to him, sorry, Craig, I know you probably think I'm bashing you here, but I had to point out to him that just because we had a shit experience at the airport and on our way to Turkey, that's not Turkey's fault. That's not the hotel's fault. That's not necessarily going to happen again, but it's our way of protecting ourselves against these things happening again. Something that I bet happens to a lot of people is that you have a great day at work and at the end of the day, somebody might say something to you that really fucking annoys you. And all of a sudden, your day is bad. The rest of your day is bad. It's put you in a bad mood. You might go home and your partner asks you how your day was. And all of a sudden, the only thing you can remember is this bloody stupid comment that somebody made to you when the rest of your day was great and everything else went well. But because of the way our brains are trained to think, all we can remember, or the thing that is at the forefront of our mind, is this stupid comment that somebody's made to you. Another example is maybe you humiliated yourself when you were drunk or something in front of your friends years ago, but you can still vividly recall exactly what happened and it still stresses you out and you still can't forget about it. Your friends have all forgotten about it by now, but in your mind, everybody still remembers it and everyone still thinks you're a dick because of it. But in reality, nobody else can remember. And in fact, that actually makes me think of something. I remember once, years and years and years ago, I accidentally sent a text to the wrong person. And as soon as that message sent, we've all done this, I'm sure. I hope everyone's done this. Or actually, I don't. That's a lie. I hope everyone hasn't done this, but I'm sure many people have. But you send a text, you press send, and then you realise it's gone to the wrong person and you just want the bloody ground to swallow you up. It's all right nowadays because you've got WhatsApp and we can delete a message. But back in the day, you couldn't do that. And oh God, I remember that feeling as soon as I sent it. I switched my phone off thinking the problem was going to go away, but of course it didn't. This is over 20 years ago now, but I still remember that to this day. And it makes me, whenever I send a message, I make sure I'm sending it to the right person. And I'm sure this person who received the wrong text message has probably forgotten about it by now, but it's something that sticks out in my mind quite regularly. I wonder if you can have a little think now and come up with something a situation that you might have been in where you have been biased towards negativity and that didn't need to be the case. And I'm not asking you to beat yourself up about it because, like I said, we're all prone to doing it, but just maybe have a think. How, knowing what you know now, how maybe you could have reframed it. But of course, there is still a place for negativity bias. So here are a few pros and cons of negativity bias. So my first pro is obviously without negativity bias, humanity would not have developed into what it is today. We just simply wouldn't be here. Without negativity bias, we might take too many risks. So negativity bias helps us weigh up situations and say, for example, you want to invest some money, or maybe you're a bit of an adrenaline drunk. Why can't I talk? Adrenaline junkie. God, that's actually quite a hard word to say. Oh dear. It helps you weigh up the risks that you're taking. So by being aware of negativity bias, you might recognize if you're being too biased towards negativity, but at least by having that weighing up of situations. Fucking hell, Hugo. Can you hear him? He is putting me right off my train of thought. What was I saying? So yeah, without negativity bias, you might take too many risks. So negativity bias does have its place and helps you to weigh up situations. And obviously, it goes without saying that there are certain places in this world that aren't as lucky as, as we are in modern civilization, when, in times of war and in times of hardship, when lives are regularly put at risk and people rely on fight or flight in order to survive. So now some of the cons that I've come up with. So doing my research, it has become apparent, and I kind of knew this already anyway, but the news, if you turn on your news, local, national, whatever, the news is predominantly negative. And there is a reason for this. Negative stories grab more attention than positive ones do. And that is so, so bloody sad. But because we're wired to think more about negative events and put them at the forefront of our mind, then obviously negative news gets more of our attention. My issue is with that, and this is why I haven't watched the news now for about 2 years. I don't watch much TV now at all, actually. But the reason why I don't is because negativity breeds, and it does bring your vibration down. Like at one point, oh God, when Corona news was rife on the TV and that was all we were seeing, I remember at one point I was getting engrossed in it, and as I'm sure many, many, many people were, and probably still do, but it got to a point where, do we need to keep watching the same miserable stuff over and over again? And I will let you come to your own conclusion on that, but I stopped watching the news. God, I hope when I listen to this back, this doesn't all sound like doom and gloom. But basically what I want to say is, by being aware of negativity bias, you can find ways to stop expecting the worst. And maybe step back from certain situations and realising when you might be overreacting about something. So this can be used, just by having knowledge on it, this can be used to our benefit. So like I said, it's not always a bad thing. There is a place for negativity bias in this world, but just being aware of it might just help you realise when you're being unnecessarily negative about something. So my reason for talking about negativity bias today, just to show you that, it's perfectly fine to still have negative thoughts and worries and anxieties, because those feelings won't ever go away. But it's important to keep your negative thoughts to a healthy level, if that makes sense. Now, all this thinking about negativity bias made me wonder if there's such a thing as positivity bias. And indeed there is. So as you would expect, positivity bias is the tendency to overestimate the possibility of good things happening in life. And interestingly, studies have shown that the positivity bias is stronger in older people and adults than it is in younger people and children. So some examples of positivity bias. So one thing is remembering your first date with your spouse. You think about the excitement and the lovely things that happened, the lovely things you did, rather than how nervous you were or how awkward the conversation was at times. If you are thinking back on your day, your memory may focus on the good things that happened, rather than, like I said, with negativity bias, you might focus on the one nice thing your boss said to you, rather than the more constructive things that they might have said to you. So negativity bias is generally stronger than positive bias. However, it does appear that the older you get, the more, I would imagine, the more you reflect on life and the less fear you have of the need for survival, if that makes sense. Okay, so as with negativity bias, there are some pros and some cons with positivity bias. So the pros are your ability to show greater gratitude. Like if you're expecting the best out of things, then you're going to be more grateful for things. Because you're generally more positive, you would have a higher vibration and a higher level of consciousness. And as I've explained before in previous episodes, the higher your level of consciousness, the higher the collective level of consciousness, so like the people around us, the better the world is, because like negativity spreads, positivity spreads as well. So the more positivity, the better, really. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a positive person, like it's an actual fact that positivity is contagious, just like negativity is. Okay, another pro is that you're more likely to take risks like setting up a new business or a new venture rather than fearing the worst. If you expect the best, then you're more likely to go for it than missing an opportunity if you were more of a negatively biased person. And then, of course, we have the cons. So if you're too positively biased, then you may assume the best of people and you may get taken advantage of. And I'm sure we can probably all think of situations where this has happened to us. I, for sure, can think of situations when I have trusted people far too quickly, far too often, and I have been hurt in the process. But the main thing is that we learn from it. But anyway, another con of being too positively biased is that you may take too many risks. If you are always expecting the best outcome, then you may take too many risks. And obviously, not every situation always pays off. You may even miss somebody's need to talk about a serious matter. So if you have a friend who wants to talk to you about something that's on their mind, if you are positively biased, then you may miss these cues. Whereas somebody who's more negatively biased would be the opposite and probably expect the worst or see the worst, if that makes sense. So I think it's safe to say that, you know, to be a well-rounded person, it would be good to have, you know, some thoughts that are negatively biased and some thoughts that are positively biased, and just know how to interchange between the two, or know how to recognise when you're being more of one than the other than you should be. And actually, we've probably, if we dig a little bit deeper, we've probably all got areas of our lives where one particular area is going to be, your thoughts are going to be negatively biased, whereas a different area of your life may be more positively biased. So it just depends on your past experiences that you've had. And it's actually quite a good idea to bear this in mind when you're talking with somebody who you may be getting frustrated with if they find they're being negatively biased. Just take into account that they might have had past experiences where they have to think negatively in order to protect themselves. Like that's their way of protecting themselves. And I think as long as it just helps us cope with other people a little bit better and just give them a bit of slack. I mean, you can't do anything about how they deal with situations, but if you can be more aware of how you're reacting to situations and be aware of why other people are reacting to situations, like I say, you're not going to change anything, but it just helps you understand them a little bit better. It's important to bear in mind the extreme versions of these two different ways of thinking. So we've just talked about positivity bias. So if you... Excuse me, I've got a runny nose all of a sudden. So if you take this to the extreme, then this then becomes toxic positivity, which nobody likes the word toxic. Nobody wants to be toxic. But toxic positivity is when you reject all difficult emotions in favour of a falsely positive facade. So you might start experiencing guilt for being sad or angry, but obviously it's okay to have these emotions. We have to be sad, we have to be angry, we have to be negative at times, because we have to have the balance. If you don't know what these negative feelings feel like, then how can you be truly positive, you know? And I kind of brushed on this earlier, but you might also dismiss others' difficult feelings. So if you had a friend, like I said earlier, that you might miss how they're feeling or miss something they want to talk about, if they do talk to you about it, toxic positivity is saying, oh, be more positive, rather than saying things like supportive things like, I know it feels tough right now, but things will get better, we'll find a way around it. Toxic positivity is dismissing how people are feeling. So, be careful not to take it to the extreme and dismiss how people are thinking, how people are feeling. You might ignore your problems. You might hide painful emotions. And as we said, you have to have these painful emotions. Like, you cannot reject these painful emotions. There's a massive difference between thinking positively and trying to find a positive outcome from shit situations to completely dismissing those shit situations and trying to pretend that everything's okay. So that is when positivity becomes toxic. On the other hand, the extreme of negativity bias is pessimism. So somebody would become very pessimistic. And there is actually a phrase called pessimism bias. So people who are overly pessimistic have a tendency to overestimate the likelihood of negative events. So they would always assume that negative things are going to happen to them. And obviously, as you can imagine, living in fear is not good for anybody, and it quite often leads to depression. So, to summarise, we need a negative bias to keep us safe and to help us assess situations. But we also need to maintain a positive mindset or outlook, trying to find a resolution. And just remember, it's healthy to have a good balance of negative and positive thoughts. It's important to recognise when you're being overly negative, but it's equally important to recognise when you're being unrealistically positive. And who knows what the right balance is? Only you can answer that question for yourself. There we go. I found this strangely intense today. I do find that when I'm talking about positivity and negativity, I'm very mindful that I don't want to go on too much about negativity, because I don't want people to think I'm dismissing negativity, like negative thoughts, like I said. I really hope it does come across that the importance of listening to your emotions, whether they're negative or positive, and honouring them and just finding a way through them. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to leave it there. Please remember to follow me on Instagram. Please remember to subscribe, rate, review and subscribe. If you are on, I've had a lovely couple of Apple reviews now. So thank you so much for those. And if you do listen to me on Apple, then please do leave me a review just to let me know what you think of the content. Drop me a message and let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about. And like I said last week, if anybody wants accountability for anything, then please do let me know. I've already had somebody ask me to keep them accountable for something. So that's great. I shall be doing that. And I've also asked this person to keep me accountable for something. So yeah, that's great. I'll see you next week, guys. Have a great week. And when you find yourself being negative about anything, just think about me and see if you can think of something positive to balance it out. See you soon, guys. Bye.